Let's roll. All right. So this is module 4. Now this is the introspection part of looking and doing the research right here, internal analysis, the resources, capabilities, and core competencies. So we've talked already about having a unique position in the industry in which you operate. You just gotta have clarity about that. It's got to be something very compelling. It could be compelling in the sense of low price, or it could be compelling in terms of differentiated, but it's got to be compelling. So, again, from where I sit, I've got a Which Wich 5 minutes from here and a Jimmy John's 10 minutes from here. And so I, as a consumer, can make my choice. Which of these two do I want to go to? 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to the freaky fast place. Jimmy John's position themselves as freaky fast. It's also their tagline, but they're more than that. I mean, I personally actually like the taste of the subs. I think the quality is good. Is it great? Not as good as 8.5. I had a 8.5 sub yesterday that was so good. Oh my gosh, it was so good. But Jimmy John's are certainly above acceptable to me. They're good. They're really good. Maybe not great, but I like them better than Which Wich. I get confused when I go into Which Wich. I don't know what's going on. I got to write stuff down. I got to move it around, and I feel like I'm holding people up in line. Which Wich is really about customization. Jimmy John's about speed. So whatever you like, I mean, they're very clear in terms of what they're trying to do, and more power to them both. Even though Which Wich is more convenient to me, which is kind of interesting. So again, brands, your position, once you pick where you want to go, there's going to be a trade-off of that. So it's a unique position, and you want that to be embedded into the brain of the consumer, so they understand exactly where you stand in terms of your unique position. And that's where marketing comes in, as well as the in-store experience comes in. So whatever you say from a marketing standpoint, if you're going to do something on TV or a billboard or a flyer or whatever, people are going to listen to what you say, but they're going to believe what you do. So your brand position has got to be consistent. So the words have to match the actions and the behaviors. And so what we're ultimately trying to do is create competitive advantage. And I'm giving you little breadcrumbs about this competitive advantage, because we'll go into real detail about that next week. But a little bit more competitive advantage. Warren Buffett calls it your moat. Your castle is the business, and the moat is what protects your business from your competition, competitive rivalry. And so what you want is, metaphorically, you want your moat to be very wide and very deep. And so when Kiersey Lannister comes calling, they're not going to be able to get into your castle. The drawbridge is going to be up, et cetera, unless they start throwing fireballs in there and lighted arrows that set fire, to whatever inside there. So when I work with clients, I use the word moat, and they know it means competitive advantage, and they actually start incorporating that into their terminology, and everybody knows what happens. So here's what happens when we talk in terms of internal analysis. Let's say you got a really wide, deep, and moat, and we know Blockbuster had a very wide and deep moat. We know Kmart used to have a wide and deep moat. But what happens is, if your senior leadership team is not demonstrating strategic leadership, if they're arrogant, if they demonstrate hubris, if they think they're too good and they're not going into the gym and working out, metaphorically, that is, you're keeping your moat wide and deep. So when customers, when brands actually want to analyze how well they're doing, they're trying to figure out if their moat is wide and deep, and that's good for them. Sometimes we get survey fatigue, and we go, oh my God, another survey from, my airline or whatever about my experience. All they're trying to do is get some level of feedback about how well they're performing. And so when your mom and dad go to the doctor for their annual physical, or your uncle, aunt, whoever, the doctor, if he or she is worth their salt, they've got some baseline data, and they're going to be able to say, okay, here's where your blood pressure was the last time. Here's where your cholesterol was the last time. Here's where your other factors were the last time. And so what's going on? Are you stressed out? Do you have anxiety, etc.? And then we can make a decision if we want to improve or not. So that's the notes. We're going to do a deep dive into that in a big way next week. So we talked about the external environment in terms of what the data collection methods are. So here's some of the tools you can use for internal. Now, when you do Lowe's, I would highly recommend you go to Glassdoor just to see what Glassdoor says. And if you get into a Lowe's, you might just want to see an employee, or if you got a friend that works at Lowe's, say, hey, what's it like work there? What are the strengths and weaknesses? What are the weaknesses of Lowe's? Remember, the external environment were the threats and opportunities. The internal environment are the strengths and weaknesses. So your data collection methods are going to be survey, they're going to be observation, they're going to be interview, they're going to be, or when you observe, it's about so the survey or interview employees, you're going to observe or experience the brand in action, interview or survey customers. And the methodology is going to vary between a B2B and a B2C. What's a B2B? Business to business. What's a B2C? Business to consumer. And so you actually will interview or survey customers. And I do a lot of my work is spent on the third bullet point right there. Actually, I got 2 projects that I'm starting up around that. And then the fourth bullet is around just KPM. So for the Lowe's project, I'm going to ask you to give me a KPM, key performance measure, for each one of the 3 strategies that you are recommending to me. There is terminology that said lead versus lag. So lag measures are going to be the financials typically, your top line revenue, the margin, your net operating income, or EBITDA, whatever a company uses. The lead metrics are the activities that you do that lead to the lag measure. So when we think about Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A says my pleasure, and what they're going to want to do is measure that. I don't know how often they measure it, but they've got some form of measurement, I'm sure, whether it's Mystery Shopper or they're using cameras somehow, etc. So if you're saying my pleasure, what percentage of the time are they saying my pleasure? And my sense is their target is 100%, but they're not 100%. They're probably 98%, which is still great. So lead measures are the things that you want to measure that will lead to lag. So if you say my pleasure, you measure it, customers feel valued. If they feel valued, not going to guarantee, but it's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to want to come back and shop with you, which will have an effect on top line, right? Revenue. And maybe even they'll bring in, a sibling or a friend or whatever. So they'll come in, sit down, and bring in more people, which will help revenue. So data collection. So for the Lowe's project and your brand project, group project, this can be a bit more difficult to find, but the more creative you are in trying to get at what employees are feeling would be wonderful, just so you can get a sense of that. Feedback, we can never forget that, feedback is a very good thing. It can be really difficult to receive at times. You come home, if you're living at home, your parents get upset at something you said or did, and then as soon as you walk in, they're blasting you. It's not the best time to give you feedback. Or if you've, got a partner and you're living with a partner, they blast you. Have a hard day at work, or you've been studying your butt off. You just had a test. You're not sure how you did with it. You come home and boom, you get blasted. So when you think about feedback and you're given feedback, you got to think about timing. You got to think about context. Those sorts of things are really important. But as a recipient of feedback, you just got to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and say, thank you, may I have another? Thank you, may I have another? Feedback is indeed so critical for an organization to know how they can improve. This notion of continuous improvement. And I gave a company some pretty tough feedback the other day, and they got back to me. I mean, literally within 30 minutes, they were giving me a response to my feedback. So again, we're going to talk about competitive advantage more. You have to look at what we call superior firm performance. And so at the end of the day, you're really focused on the resources the firm has. The resources could be people resources. So I'm a resource, as a consultant. I get hired and I provide knowledge. I provide facilitation. Tomorrow, I will be meeting with a technology consulting firm in town called UDIG. For the IS folks in the room, check them out. It's UDIG, UDIG Consulting. They used to be Pure Staff Aug. Then they migrated to consulting, and then they're diversifying into another category, and I'm helping them with that diversification. I'm a resource. So they don't hire me all the time, but maybe once a year they'll call me and say, hey, Bob, we're thinking about this. Can you come in and you help us? So as that is a technology consulting firm, I'm extremely careful about working with other technology consulting firms unless I get this client's permission. So that's a resource. And then, if you think about it, supermarkets, P&G is one of their resources as well, right? So there's a lot of similarity between resources. What's going to differ are the capabilities that you might have. Capabilities are essentially the skills. So if you are really good at Excel, that's a capability. And for those of you who are really good and sharp at Excel, man, market that. Make sure you talk about that in the interviews, because that is a very sought after capability. So between your resources and the capabilities, those come together to create these things called core competencies. And at the end of the day, it's the core competencies that allow a firm's performance to operate at a pretty high level. And if you then bring those together, they're able to produce a certain level of activities that create the competitive advantage. So what do I mean by that? Let's go back to Chick-fil-A for a second. The resources are their associates. The resources will be the technology device company that gives them the tablets. The resources will be the construction firm that built the drive-through, the canopy, and all that stuff, the parking lot. And then the capabilities are that they're going to train their team to be out there. They're on the headsets, they're using the tablets, and then they're communicating to the kitchen what you want in your car when you order. And so the activity, really is translating those resources and capabilities to a core competency around operational excellence as it relates to the drive-through and the actual activities that they're engaged in to deliver that to you ultimately creates a competitive advantage. There is no question that Chick-fil-A, at least the ones that I primarily shop, have a competitive advantage around operational excellence, not only what's going on inside of the restaurant, but outside of the restaurant as well. So operational excellence is a competitive advantage. Building and sustaining a culture, high performance culture, is a source of competitive advantage. And so organizations have to think about how they really want to operate. So let's go back to Jimmy John's. If they're going to say they're freaky fast, they can't just again throw pixie dust at it. they got to think about how they're going to be freaky fast. So their resources are the guys and girls who drive the bikes. The resources are who constructs, the architects in the stores. They're able to work phone systems, and they got training that helps build capabilities, and then they translate that to core competencies and activities which lead to competitive advantage. So Walmart's got core competencies, Target's got core competencies. Competency for Target has been established around identifying and manage their private brands, Goodfellow brand. And they've become really good at that. And that's a core competency for Wegmans as well. And so building core competencies is important. So for those of you who are interested in data management, Kroger has a core competency around data management. They've become pretty darn good at how they manage your data and what they offer you based upon what you buy. So this oftentimes is behind the scenes that you as a consumer don't see. But let's go back and talk about what core competencies are. The unique strengths. Maybe, one company, one competitor and another will have a similar core competency, but usually they're unique. And the uniqueness means that it's aligned to how the brand is trying to position itself. They're embedded deep in the brand because of repetition, because of training, because of messaging. It definitely allows for differentiation of products and services from rivals. And the brands often have about 3 to 5. It's really hard to be great at more than 5 core competencies. So the theory is it's going to result in higher value for the customer, you and me. We see it, we taste it, we smell it, we hear it, we feel it. Whatever it is, it's going to create higher value for us, and or it's going to enable a brand to offer products and services at a lower price. So the core competencies of Walmart are going to be different than the core competencies of Wegmans. And that's what allows differentiation. And so wherever you go to work, one of the things you got to try to figure out is, when I go and do my job, am I an important part of delivering and creating the core competencies for the company? Ucrop Supermarkets, where I worked, we were the first in the world to come up with a card-based marketing program. Mention that. But we never could build a core competency around it. That was a big failure on my part. We were very relationship. We had a core competency at building a high performance culture. We had a core competency around fresh food innovation, but we didn't have a core competency around data management. And really, I was in charge of all that, and that was a big failure on my part. So even though we were a first mover for a card-based marketing program, and everybody's got them now almost, some companies with a lot more resources decided to build a capability at it. And Kroger, using a consulting firm actually out of the UK, was the first to do that. And then, of course, you probably have heard about Target, through shopping behavior, knew that a 16-year-old girl was pregnant before her father. I mean, that's predictive analytics. It's leveraging data, and we just weren't good at it. So even though we went first, we lost ground because we couldn't build core competency around it. This is really an important message as we think about that. So, for example, some core competencies: IKEA, designing modern functional home furnishings at a low cost. Beats, marketing, creating a perception of coolness. Facebook, IT capabilities to provide reliable social network services on a global scale. And of course, Netflix, proprietary algorithms based on individual customer preferences. So every organization is going to have, if they operate at a performance level. So what's a core competency of Kmart? I don't know. I mean, again, they used to have it, but they used to be a really great company. They call them blue light specials. They're really good at promotion and marketing. So if we think about Chipotle and what their core competencies are, unit and franchise owner selection process, creating a high performance culture, food supply chain development and management process, and store operational excellence. Now, let's talk about Chipotle. I love the brand, but they have fallen down on two of these, right, in the past several years. One of them was, of course, the foodborne illness that got into their supply chain, into their cold chain. And I can't remember where it was from. They think, still don't know for sure, but they had a vendor that they think it came from. So even though you have a core competency in something, when you take your eye off the ball, when you're not focused relentlessly on it, you can get out of shape with it. Just like a football team, right? And so we're seeing right now what teams from last year who were great at offense or defense or special teams, who has been able to carry that over into the new year. Interesting, Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl last year, and every one of their starters is back this year. It's really unusual for that to occur. The other issue that Chipotle is struggling on now is, I would say, in-store operational excellence. Well, why is that? Well, we know that order pickup is a big part of the restaurant world, particularly for Chipotle, and their stores just weren't designed for it. And so when I've been in the one on the Gray Street, I'll go in and I'll order in store to wait to bring it back to my office, or this was pre-COVID, and I would wait. I would see 5, 6, 7 packages ready for pickup from those that had already ordered, and nobody's coming. They're just sitting there, and then here I am. I've already ordered. I'm just waiting. And it used to be that they'd want me to get that within 5 minutes of the the cashier hitting the, okay, here's the tender, he's done, etc. But I waited frequently. I'm waiting 15 plus minutes. The other thing is they decided to get into drive-through with their new standalone, and that's a disaster. I mean, I have tried the drive-through at Chipotle 3 times. Ain't going to do it anymore. And it's just so slow. So, and I say this, and I love them as a brand. I really do. But they have got to jack it up. They've got to get better. On number 4, as we transition to more of you ordering, through their app, online, and then going to pick up. And what it's doing is it's interfering with their in-store experience. And then the drive-through, they just haven't figured that out as well. What's interesting is you think about fast casual versus fast food. Chipotle has always been perceived as fast casual, which means that you order in store and then you wait, or you go to your table and you sit there and you drink your iced tea and you chat with your friend, or you open up your laptop, etc. So you got something going on while you're eating in store. But this is an issue that they're going to have to overcome. Now, how critical is it? Well, if if Sweetgreen comes to Richmond, if other brands start to come to Richmond that have operational excellence, then they may start to pull business away from Chipotle. So we'll see where it goes, but that's the power of it. There's another concept related to that. It's called core rigidity. And so core rigidity is when you have a core competency that's really good. I would say that Blockbuster for years had a core competency around in-store service and in their ability for anticipating and selecting videos that their consumers are going to want to buy. And so they leveraged it and they were successful at it. But again, when the inflection point of streaming video came out, they refused to transition that way at the level and speed that they should. So their core competency around brick and mortar and all the capabilities that went with that ended up becoming a liability for them. And so so that's that's a great example of a brand who was amazing at brick and mortar, but just resisted going to streaming video. So I see the concept around Roots Natural Kitchen, which is competition for Chipotle, and they're slowly expanding. So Natalie, talk to me about Roots Natural Kitchen. I've never heard of them.
Don't mind the Mexican music in the background, like talking. I'm at work, but Roots Natural Kitchen, I think, started in Charlottesville, and it's kind of like Chipotle in the sense that they have like a line of food and like build your own burrito bowls, and they have one on West Grace by like Hibachi Box and Village Cafe. And my brother, he actually used to work for Chipotle, and he was there for years. They slowly started going down, not only like, I guess in quality sense, but he was there for so long that he noticed when his higher ups kind of changed their way of working too. So he ended up leaving Chipotle, and he now works for Roots, and they've just been expanding like crazy. He oversees like the Charlottesville location, the Richmond location. They just opened another one in Richmond. He oversees the one in Pittsburgh. So they're like slowly expanding. I think the biggest difference is like they don't really do like burritos and tacos, but the bowl is really like their staple.
Cool. And that's your brother?
Yeah, my brother, he just works for them, but he's always been in the like fast casual food business, and he always like works his way up, but he's worked his way up pretty high into Roots at this point.
Isn't that wonderful? Thank you for sharing that, Natalie. All right, so so Blockbuster exhibited core rigidity, and of course Walmart exhibited core rigidity, and they exhibited core rigidity by moving to online retail. They struggled with it, and so sometimes we get embedded in the status quo. And the one thing I want to tell you is, as you leave and you graduate, most of you this semester, you can never stop learning and building your own competitive advantage, right? In your core competencies. You know, you just can't stop. I mean, you gotta always do it. I went to a leadership workshop many years ago, and the gentleman leading, his name is Jerry Bell, he's at UNC, and he told us that the research will show us that every year we've got to add about 20 to 25% new capabilities to what we're able to do to keep pace with all the changes going on. So Blockbuster, Walmart, tons of other examples where core rigidity was displayed. When we talk about resources, capabilities, and activities, these help us deliver the core competencies. So the resources are assets that a firm can draw upon. Capabilities are the skills, organizational and managerial skills. So remember that concept of firm effect. Firm effect are really the level of strategic leadership, management skills that an organization will manifest and become a huge part of organizational performance. And then activities, and the activities should be distinct and fine-grained and business processes. So when you go and you listen to the Five Guys podcast, the founder talked about just the potatoes. That's what he calls them, not potatoes, the potatoes. And he talked about only going to a very unique potato grower. And so organizations who want to build a capability at great tasting food with great ingredients that is used to make the food, they're gonna build unique activities that are distinct and fine-grained for ultimately how they're trying to deliver the product and service. So these issues, resources, capabilities, and activities help you drive ultimately your competitive advantage. Now, an RB resource-based view, again, is where resources are key to superior performance as they aid in developing core competencies. So these are intangible, and these are resources that usually do not have physical attributes. And so this could be like brand equity or culture. Intangible are those things that an accountant can count. So these are the machinery and the tools, and they're very visible and they're clearly measurable. And so interesting when a company wants to sell. So if I'm a entrepreneur and I've been running a firm for 30 years and I'm burned out and I'm ready to sell it, and I've got an amazing reputation in my market spot. So the brand equity is unbelievable. The culture is unbelievable. The company who wants to buy me may not always try to give a value to that. So this is a struggle, because building brand equity and building culture requires an investment, of time and resources. And, if you think about building a high performance culture, that takes a huge amount of time and effort. And so, but when it comes to acquiring a company, the valuation process may not always include the equity or the culture that goes with it, but they're still very important to do. So when we think about assumptions for a resource-based view or approach, we have resource heterogeneity, which is a brand possesses unique bundle of resources and capabilities, and these bundles differ across brands in the industry. So that's what allows us to have a Publix and a Wegmans, et cetera. And then resources and mobility, as resources don't easily move from brand to brand. So resources are difficult to replicate. Resources can last for a long time, as long as they are cared for in terms of financial and relationship investments. So that means that you're keeping the moat wide and deep. So going back to Natalie's point and what we were talking about with Chipotle, for whatever reason, they let their moat fill up with sand and muck, etc. And they lost brand equity because of it. You and I, or many of us, started to get a little fearful for going in because we didn't want to get sick. So we backed away. We shifted the competition. And now, I mean, I would go in there in a heartbeat. I wouldn't even think about it anymore. But for about a year or so, I thought about maybe I don't want to go into Chipotle now. So we really have to continue to invest in it. And I can tell you this, that I'll be going into Roots Natural Kitchen within the next month when I'm back down on campus. So the framework is really about evaluating your firm's resources and are these resources valuable? Are they rare? Are they costly to imitate? And the firm must be really organized to capture the value of the resource. So, when you think about an NBA basketball team, because there's only 5 people on the court at once, you might have one player or 2 players that really can make a difference for a given team. But for a football team, you're talking about having 22 people, 11 on offense and defense, plus special teams. It's going to take more than just, one person. So yes, Tom Brady went down to Tampa Bay, but he was also able to bring Gronk with him. I think Antonio Brown is the other wide receiver that he was able to bring. And I think there were others that came. And those same people who came and played last year knew how great it is and know how difficult it is to build a Super Bowl team. So some of them probably could have left to get more money, but they decided to stay and say, let's give it a one more shot at least. And we'll see what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do as they play this year. So another way of looking at tangible and intangible resources, the visible is about labor, capital, land, buildings, plant, equipment, supplies. And then the intangible is about culture, knowledge, brand equity, reputation. IP to a certain degree, to me, that's a little fuzzy because that could be over on the tangible if you've got some real powerful IP that you have protected. But culture, knowledge, brand equity, and reputation, all for sure are regarded as intangible resources. So there's a really cool metaphor. It's called the bathtub metaphor, and it's about lack of investment. And so all the things that we've been talking about so far, capabilities, resources, all those things, can come together, and organizations can focus. So resources, a supplier. So your supplier relationships, your innovation capability, your new product development capability, your engineering expertise, all these things have to be treated incredibly delicately, and you just got to constantly get better, right? You can't stay still. You have to be willing to go and to look yourself in the mirror and say, what do I need to do to get better? And what do I need to do to reinvest in my business? Monday, I just got new windows up in my upstairs in my house. My house was built in 1906, so it's 115 years old. Because of all the moving and shaking and twisting and all sorts of stuff, the windows over the past several years just haven't been, I can't lock a couple of them, etc. So we decided to invest in the windows, investing in our building infrastructure, home infrastructure, and that was a $10,000 investment. And even though it was needed and the windows are really nice, it's still hard to write a check for $9,944, but you got to do it. And when you build a home or buy a home, and it's going to happen more when you buy a home, at some point you're going to have to reinvest in the HVAC and the electrical and the plumbing, whatever it is. And it's the same with business. You have to constantly reinvest in it just to stay even, but sometimes you want to invest to try to get better. So if your HVAC system goes down in your business, you got to fix it, but you're not going to get a return on that because your customers are expecting to walk in and the temperature of the building being appropriate. So that's going to be a $500,000 investment that you just got to do. But maybe you want to, change where your blowers are for your fried chicken or your bakery department to try to stimulate purchasing behavior, and maybe you'll be able to get a better return on that. So again, if you just take a look at this Kmart, look how disgusting that looks on the outside. Look at that. It's just filthy. Would you want to put your child on one of those toys? Shopping carts everywhere. Look at the trash. Stuff's on top of the trash. So it's a great example of the bathtub metaphor in the sense that why Kmart hasn't invested in itself, hasn't invested in its brand, it's in the wilderness. It just, I don't know how it hangs on, to be honest with you. But they do, and I think they do better in Australia. I think a student told me that a couple of years ago, that the brand in somewhere else in the world it does a better job than here. But this is a great example of a brand gone bad. Just they're not willing to invest in in what's needed to ultimately be successful. So the dynamic capabilities perspective is really about modifying and leverage its resource base, gain and sustain competitive advantage in a constantly changing environment. So as your environment changes, you have to adjust. And remember, it's not the smartest or the strongest of the species that survive. It's those that are most willing to adapt to change. Same way with organizations, guys. For whatever reason, lack of strategic leadership, Kmart has not been able to change. Blockbuster was not able to change. Borders Books was not able to change. And so one of the toughest things that any CEO and their senior team does is being open to criticism, and then figuring out what do we need to do to adjust our business model. And of course, the market changes are required due to technology change, deregulation, globalization, demographic shifts. And these are the inflection points that we talked about earlier. And so Harley Davidson is going through this with demographic shifts, as their core customer for 20 years is now, as we've talked about, going into assisted living, or they're just getting sick, or their families don't want them to drive their Harley anymore. They haven't been able to appeal to the next generation of consumer here in the US. They've again done pretty well in India and some other global markets. So every brand, as great as a brand is, there's a shelf life of how good it can be without some level of renewal going on. So if we use P&G, fantastic, organization, in terms of just its reputation, but it found itself in the wilderness a little bit. And so one of the things going on with P&G was that they knew how to attract me and the baby boomers younger than me and baby boomers older than me, and maybe to some certain degree the older Gen Xers, but they really fell down when appealing to the millennial population, and it took them a number of years to figure that out. So P&G was dealing with a lot of things. First of all, they were dealing with this concept of private brands, products. Target's Goodfellow. Once again, I've got a Goodfellow t-shirt on, $6.99. Some people call them phantom brands. I call them, private brands. Some people call them private label. These are typically produced by a company to offer another company. And so manufacturers who do private brands usually are okay with them. They have no ego, so they don't need to know, or they don't need to have their brand well known in the marketplace. As a matter of fact, if you try to figure out who makes the Goodfellow brand, I would love to know where it's done. It's probably in Asia, but specifically the name of the company. It's hard. I can't say I've spent a whole day at it, but off and on over the past year, I've probably spent 2 or 3 hours just trying to understand who are all these manufacturers making the Target private brands. And they've got a lot of different categories. And I'm just speaking to Goodfellow and Company, which are the brands that are targeted for the male consumer there. So private brands, of course, are available in a wide range of industries, from food to cosmetics, even to web hosting. So private brands was an issue that P&G was trying to grapple with. Then they had new entrants, such as Harry's or Dollar Shave Club, which are driving costs down or differentiating in a unique way. And so even though if you go into Target's men's grooming section right now, they've got a pretty big display for Harry's, but they've also got their Goodfellow display as well. So we talk again about co-opetition, but that's Target, and this is what gives Target leverage over some of the national brands. So we talked about Porter's Five Forces model. When before Target went into private label, private brands, they didn't have a lot of bargaining power, but now that they're heavy into it, it's a huge part of their business model. They've got more leverage with the P&Gs of the world, which are their suppliers. You got consumer behaviors changing, especially during the pandemic, right? I mean, during the pandemic, I looked like, I was a mad professor. I looked like that dude in Back to the Future. I hadn't cut my hair. It was all straight up. It looked like I had put my finger in a light bulb socket. Wasn't shaven. I was terrible. And so a lot of people were pulling back on a lot of the items in grooming that they had been doing before. And then once things started coming back a little bit normal, we're going out, all right, we better start using the deodorant a little bit more. I'm going to start cutting my hair a little bit more. you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's interesting. One of my clients and a very good friend is a plastic surgeon. And so at the early stage of the pandemic, he had to shut down from the middle of March till June 10th. So it was April, May, almost 3 months of being completely shut down. And I love this guy, but he was driving me crazy because he was terrified that when we reopened, people weren't going to be coming back in. But here's what happened during COVID, right? All these people were sitting in front of a camera and they're staring at themselves and they're going, oh my God, is that what I look like? And so 2 weeks before he was going to open, his phone started going crazy. And his customers and people who had never thought about, you know, going to a plastic surgeon. He does face. Um, I mean, he couldn't keep up. And he ended up doing better in 2020 when he looked at doing all his surgery, all his stuff from middle of June to the rest of the year. He did better in 2020 than he did in all years, you know, 19, 18, et cetera. And so he was panicking, he was nervous, but it turns out the Zoom and stuff got people up close and personal with all their little, you know, nooks and crannies or whatever. And so he's been doing phenomenal since then. So it's kind of weird, you know, how for him, as terrible as it is, again, the pandemic was an opportunity for him to drive growth and performance. So then supply chain pressure, suppliers, this is a huge issue right now. Of course, we've been talking about it every session, that are elevating wait times and cost of goods sold. So and this is going to continue, but it's not going to be forever. You know, supply chain pressure, you know, the suppliers now have a lot of power in terms of pricing, stimulating some inflation. We know from Monday, it tends to be more on the durable side, but it's still there and it's probably going to go on for 12 to 24 months. Again, for you supply chain students out there, one of my clients is a company called R.A. Jones. Check them out. And they are as far downstream as you can get. They're actually design and make the manufacturing equipment that Keurig uses for their K cups, that Clorox uses for their wipes, that Star Tuna Fish uses for the pouches, Quaker Oats uses for their pouches. Just about every CPG item that we consume has to have a packaging partner who designs and makes the equipment that is used to make the products. And so they were under enormous pressure as the Cloroxes of the world wanted to increase the making of their wipes, and they were incenting my client to build their stuff more. It's very fascinating. And so I did a strategy assignment with them earlier in the year, and I'll be doing some implementation with them, I think later in the fall. We'll see. So you got the private labels, you got the new entrants that are coming in, you got China and their supply chain issues and the coronavirus. Now, another issue affecting supply chain, forget the manufacturers, are the container ships. Everything's getting plugged up. And so once again, this is going to take us a while, but if these companies were worth their salt, they're already doing long range strategy work and scenario planning, trying to figure out how they can handle this in the future. I will bet you your favorite restaurant dinner that we're going to start to see companies moving from China and Asia back closer to the US. Maybe the manufacturing won't be in the US, but maybe Mexico. You know, this probably would be the best thing for Central America and all the terrible stuff going on down there, if we could figure out how to build up the manufacturing capability, because so much of this crap that goes on in countries is about employment. You know, even Arab Spring that occurred in the Middle East a number of years ago. Yes, it was about dictatorships, et cetera, but a lot of it was about unemployment. And it's one of the reasons why Saudi Arabia is trying to diversify their economy as best as they can. So adapt or die. So the dynamic capabilities, again, are adapting your resources over time. And so you're trying to develop resources, capabilities, competencies, create a strategic fit, and change in a dynamic fashion. So when Darwin said, again, it's not the strong or the smart that survive, it's those most adaptive to change. Saying you want to change is one thing. It's like if you want to lose weight, I will say I want to lose weight right now. But if I'm not willing to go into the gym and alter my diet, it ain't going to happen. And so you can say something, you can establish something that we want to change, but you have to go back and make sure that you're building the strategy to be able to do that. So again, when we think about Darwin, it is such an important component going forward. And here are the brands again: A&P, Blockbuster, the Limited Borders, Circuit City, Toys R Us, Radio Shack, SNK. They couldn't adjust, they couldn't adapt. Toys R Us is an interesting story again, because yes, a lot of people started buying their toys at Walmart. They started buying them online. Target got a lot better with toys. Then you had specialty toy companies that opened up, Build-A-Bear, all this stuff. But they got bought by private equity, and private equity used debt to buy them. And then the debt ended up creating about 300 to 400 million a year in just interest expense. And Toys R Us, given the fact of all the other stuff going on, Walmart, Amazon, etc., their business model couldn't accommodate it. And so when we think about what happened in the early stages of the pandemic, when consumer behavior started to slow down, they weren't purchasing, the companies that had a lot of debt just couldn't handle it. And so they filed for Chapter 11. All these companies went down in the 2008 recession. And of course, we know that there are a bunch of companies that went down, with COVID. So at the end of the day, it is about what you perceive to be a value and what I perceive to be a value. That's the bottom line. And so some of us will go out and we'll buy a Ford. Some of us will go out and buy a Honda, and some of us will go out and buy a Mercedes. And I've never owned a Mercedes. I've been in a Mercedes plenty of times, and I think they're a really cool car. But we go back to what we want as a consumer, and then what are we willing to pay for? Which is the bottom line. What is it? How many of you are willing to go into Five Guys because you're going to pay a lot more, almost double what you would pay in McDonald's? So it's about value creation. And at the end of the day, that's why understanding your customer base is so important. So if you were to think, how would you define the customer base of Mercedes? Or how would you define the customer base of Patagonia? Or how would you define your customer base of Five Guys or of McDonald's or Burger King, whoever? You have three pieces of that pie. And for the marketing students, you've probably learned about the notion of personas. And personas represent the different categories of consumers within an industry. And then a brand will have different customers as well, or different personas as well. So for an industry, or generally speaking, your primary customer, which is considered to be the tribe, these are the customers who are totally devoted to the brand and what it stands for. So some of you may be hardcore Apple fans. So every one of your devices is Apple. You have an Apple desktop or a MacBook, you have an iPhone, you have an Apple Watch, you have Apple earbuds, whatever. It's just all Apple, and you do not go anywhere else other than Apple. So you're a primary customer to Apple. Now, what's your demographics? How old are you? What's your background? What do you what do all these all these elements then become, where's the similarity between you and other primary Apple customers? What's interesting about Apple is they've diversified their customer base over time. You might have been a little young, but you might have remembered the commercials where it was the PC guy that was a little overweight, little husky, very nerdy, wore glasses. He had a suit coat that didn't fit right. He had and his pants were, kind of up past his belly button. He looked nerdy. And then you had the Apple guy, cool guy, black t-shirt, jeans, looked like a creative. And so what Apple was really doing was it was segmenting the market in the technology world. We're cooler, our customers are cooler, et cetera. Well, they're not going to run that ad anymore. And the reason is the dude who used to be the PC is also now the Apple customer. And your grandma, who wouldn't even buy a smartphone now probably has an iPhone. And so, I'm an Apple person for the most part, but I do have a Pixel. It's right there. I know it's 3 o'clock right now. And I love my first Pixel, and I love this Pixel up until about 3 months ago. And my camera went out and I haven't been able to fix it. And so I'm going to go out, and I've been reading all about the Pixel, the new version of the Pixel and the new iPhone. And I'm getting a lot of pressure from my family to get an iPhone. So every device I own is Apple except my phone. And so I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a new iPhone, which I can't believe I'm saying, but I will. The secondary is an occasional shopper who like the product but are loyal to another brand. So, so this would be, I really like Kroger, but I also enjoy going into Trader Joe's. Or I'll go into Wegmans when I need to get a really good piece of salmon. So your secondary customer is a crossover shopper usually, and they'll shop with you for a particular product or service, but they're still very loyal to another brand. And then the tertiary is you don't possess any loyalty, but will buy infrequently when it's advantage for you. So typically tertiary customers are opportunistic, usually very price driven. So, if they buy a Patagonia item, maybe they get it at a secondhand market or a flea market, or they buy it online, and they don't have to pay full price to it. It's interesting. I went into the Mac store on Main Street right by campus yesterday, and I was meeting with somebody right next door, and they hadn't come in yet. And I went in and I'm looking at a lot of those desktops, and they're like $500. They're big desktops, and they look brand new. And I knew they weren't new because of the price, and so they've been refurbished, etc. So, I've got this really nice big desktop, Apple desktop here, and I've got one in my office too. But I need to have it refurbished because it doesn't provide the background for the Zoom that I want. So I've got to figure that out, and I'll figure that out probably in the next month or so. So primary, secondary, and tertiary are important elements, especially now when you think about doing your project for Lowe's, right? So I am a primary customer of Lowe's. I buy a lot at Lowe's. I am in Lowe's at least once a week. I'm a secondary shopper for home and garden type stuff. I'm probably getting, I would say I'm a secondary shopper for Walmart for my home and garden, and the tertiary is Pleasance Hardware. I just don't find myself going into Home Depot that much for whatever reason. So what is it about me? When you do your research on Lowe's, you got to find out about me and why it is that I really like Lowe's. And there's a number of reasons. I'm not going to tell you. That's your job to find out when you talk to people in terms of who their primary customer is and what's the difference between a primary customer of Lowe's and a primary customer of Home Depot. So the rubber hits the road then on these value chain activities. And these are activities and tasks that the firm completes in order to produce products and then sell, distribute the service and products in a way that creates value for the customer. So for those of you who go to Chick-fil-A, think about what it is. Those two pickles, I love the pickles. The Chick-fil-A sandwich, it's made in peanut oil. The My Pleasure, the fact that they've got newspapers. You know, if I go in to see it, I can grab a newspaper and I can read the newspaper and got caught up. I think it's actually the Washington Post, which I don't get, and I usually don't read. I read the Wall Street every day. That's value chain. It's the fact that they've got the drive-through. And so it's the fact that the different sauces that you can get for the items. So the value chain at the end of the day is what makes us fall in love with brands. Or if we don't like what they offer in the value chain, we just don't resonate with us and say, I'm not going back. And even when you think about, you know, who you fall in love with, you know, at the end of the day, it's those things that that person does and how they make you feel. Might be the words they use or the little things that they do for you. You know, whether it's, you know, you're not feeling well and they take care of you when you're not feeling well, or they bring you breakfast in bed. You know, and all those things are really important, you know, for relationships, you know, and then the habits that you create and the celebrations you create. The same thing with brands, you know. So I opened up the closet right there, and there in the closet was a Apple box for my MacBook. And I bought my MacBook 4 years ago, and I'm thinking to myself, why the heck have I kept that Apple box? It's part of their value chain. And the fact that when you opened up about, you know, an Apple, it's like that little piece of thin plastic on it, and it's boom, you hit a button. It's just so easy to set it up. So whether it's a Chick-fil-A or whether it's that huge greasy bag of fries at Five Guys, or the psychedelic Coke machine at Five Guys, or the fact that they give you peanuts while you wait because the burger is customized, so they're not going to be fast like McDonald's. So all these things play out in our mind and they create our experience. And so the experience is all about the activities, and either it's going to resonate with us or it's not. And I used to hate Walmart. I actually will go into Walmart quite a bit, but I love Target. And I love the way Target merchandises to me, how they pay attention to me. I love the men's grooming section in Target. And you know, Target, you know, is known for having primarily a female consumer. The research will tell you that, and Target knew that. And so what they've tried to do is appeal more to the male consumer. And they've really done a great job with me. And it's been primarily through their value chain activities that they do that. So the value chain then is, you know, it can be divided into two areas. One are the support activities. So that's what behind the scenes R&D, information systems, HR, accounting, finance, you know, all the things that create the primary activities, which are supply chain management, operations, distribution, marketing, sales, and after sales service and support. And it's going to have an effect on margin. All this is going to, and this is part of your business model. So every organization, if they're going to try to differentiate through the culture, then they're going to be investing more in human resources. And an easy way for you to know what a company emphasizes is by you understanding where HR reports. If HR stands alone, reports directly to the CEO or the president of the company, then HR is considered to be an important driver of success for the business. If HR is hidden under accounting and finance, then it's not really going to have as much emphasis as otherwise. Does the firm even have a research and development office, or do they outsource it? So all these activities are really focused on delivering what the brand is ultimately trying to do. So so when you think of Chick-fil-A, as we've talked about, My Pleasure, it's a lead measure, it's also a brand clue, and it reinforces to the customer that they value you. It's not you're welcome or anytime or sure thing, but it's my pleasure. And so that is, that's an important consideration. So they own that. If I go into my dry cleaners, which I love, Puritan, and they say my pleasure, I kind of chuckle to myself that, okay, they're really emphasizing customer service and they're using my pleasure as a way to do that. So value chain activities are an important consideration for that. So when we think about this notion of culture eating strategy for lunch, it's ultimately it's about the brand and how the people behave and what's important and how it works to be successful. So if we think about culture, it's really defined as the basic beliefs and assumptions that are shared by members of the organization, especially the leadership. And the beliefs and assumptions are learned and they get played out in many different ways. And so this is In-N-Out Burger and Glassdoor. They're regarded as the third best place to work in America, as explained by Glassdoor. So for Lowe's, where's Lowe's? Are they 10? Are they 20? Are they in top 100? Where are they? So why must culture be understood? It's visible, it's feelable. Performance and employee engagement cannot be understood unless one take into account culture. So we go back to Uber. This is their CEO, their founder, and Uber got in a lot of trouble because of their culture. So goes the leader, so goes the group. If you go back to the strategic leadership module, you'll know that one of the 5 key areas of responsibility of a strategic leader is to build a high performance culture. He built a culture, and it was a culture that he felt was aligned to how he wanted the brand to be, which was a lot of sharp elbows, and it got him into a lot of trouble. And so what we see is that whether it's this dude or the WeWork CEO or Elizabeth Holmes for Theranos, the Volkswagen CEO, the Wells Fargo CEO, they led an organization where there was a lot of dysfunction at the top and created a lot of problems. So key culture assumptions: leadership teams that believe in culture and possess great chemistry have a greater likelihood of producing great results. Change is more easily navigated when everyone is strategically and culturally moving in the same direction. And then dysfunctional culture and conflict are resolved. I loved Circuit City, but Circuit City has a lot of dysfunctional culture at the top of the organization. Blockbuster had a lot of dysfunction at the top of the organization. And that just cascades down, and it's felt by everybody. So Fortune does a survey every year, and these were their top 10 for 21: Cisco, Salesforce, Hilton. Look where Wegmans is, number 4. Supermarket, number 4. And the net profit of a supermarket is about 2% compared to some of these companies that are 15, 20%. So Rocket Companies is in there. Look at Capital One, number 9. Capital One is a great company, but it's not going to be the right fit for everybody. So this is that even though they're in the top 10, Capital One is going to operate in such a way that not everybody is going to feel like they fit in. Just like when I worked at Philip Morris, I still did really well, but I never felt like I fit in. So culture is really important. That's why these organizations invest a lot of time and resources. So at the end of the day, so goes the leader, so goes the group, and the behavioral norms and the language used by the constituencies, traditions, celebrations, how people dress, the design of the workspace, artifacts. These are like artwork and stuff on the walls, as well as unique benefits that reinforce what the company considers important, or all important elements. All right, so we've done the external, we just did the internal. And when you do research, you're trying to bubble it down. So you do a SWOT assessment. You're looking at the strengths, keep them stronger. You're looking at getting rid of the weaknesses. You're looking at making sure that you're not going to get bowled over by the threats. And then you're going to look at the opportunities to determine which one of them can you leverage and to be better. And so next Monday, of course, is we won't be live, but next Wednesday we'll really dig deep into this whole notion of competitive advantage.